Oh, are we? Oh, I can't see you.
Oh, 48-hour art check. Josh can't see me, so I can't see him. Sorry, I didn't tell you. I thought you could see what's going on.
No problem.
And here we are. Okay.
I'm not sure how much of that I recorded, but there was a point there where I was flying blind and just seeing a dot where Corey was. So, yeah, what episode are we on?
Oh
This is
boy, what episode are we on?
117?
Something like that. Yeah.
Holy moly.
I'm gonna get a calendar and put it on my wall and mark it. I don't know.
That's smart, actually.
I was thinking if we do this. Oh no, we lost Josh. Come back, Josh. Let me copy link to share. I'm gonna turn this off. Should go to the same feed. So we're live again. All right. So I don't know how this is gonna work because I just turned it off because we lost Josh. But this may be a new video or maybe the same video, but it should be the same feed. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. All right. So should we jump in? Oh yeah, we were talking. I was thinking if we do this 3 times a week, that's like more than 150 episodes a year.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're gonna get to like 300 episodes. 450. Like, it's gonna climb pretty fast. Anyway, it's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. So
No, it's nuts. So we're gonna have to have like, some kind of award for people who've been there for like the whole time.
yeah, we should have.
Who've
Oh, we
signed
should
up.
have achievement badges. Where
Yes.
if you've participated in the chats for like a certain number of chats, you get a little digital badge. I don't know where you'd
Ooh,
put
I
it,
like
but
that.
yeah, we
I
should.
like that.
We could send people pins or something. That would be cool.
Yeah, we'll have to kind of conspire and come up with some giveaways for all our buddies who keep showing up and supporting the show.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Um, Speaking of buddies, I'm sure we'll get into this with the art week, but man, that stream you did last night, that was super fun.
Yeah, that was way cool. I
Yeah.
like in retrospect, I should have handled it way differently, but everybody that came on was pretty awesome, so that was pretty fun. So
Yeah, and I think you're overly critical of yourself, because it's like it played well. It was
oh, good.
enjoyable.
Yeah, that's good. I was just thinking, like, I kept doing things like I would ask a question to the room, right? But the fact is, like, when you do that in a classroom, everyone can look at each other, and so that you know who's going to talk first or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you do that, when everybody's looking at like a tiny little thumbnail of everyone on their phone, like nobody has any idea what everybody else is doing. And so, next time, here's my plan in case anybody's wondering. The next time I do something like that, I'm going to write everybody's name down on a piece of paper, and then I'm going to make marks on who has spoken so that I make sure to moderate, like, because I feel like I left a few people out on a few questions unintentionally. And anyway,
Yeah.
I wanted to hear from everybody, and everybody participated, and it was really awesome. But there was always that, like, I ask a question dumbly to like no one, and then everyone sits there and goes, "Are you talking to me or everyone?" Or I guess I'll go. And then like there's that pause where no one says anything, and then 3 people try to start talking at once. Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, and that's my fault because I should have just been like Wes, Gerald.
Well, no,
You know.
you just like if you ever do it again, you just need me there so I can interrupt all the
Right? Yeah.
time. I'm just kidding because I that's a one of my personality flaws is like I get excited when I hear a topic that's very common for people to interrupt, and I will interrupt, and then I'll regret it right after I've done it, and
Right.
it's been a problem my whole life.
That's
Comes
funny.
from being a loud family where you
Right.
just like
Yeah.
there's a bunch of siblings talking, and you have to be the loudest and just cut through.
Yeah.
But yeah,
My
yeah,
wife's family is like that, and when they first met me, uh, they were like, "Wow, he's really quiet," and I was like, "I just don't feel like competing in volume to talk, so I'm perfectly happy just to sit here and let the 9 of you have this conversation over each other."
and that is healthy. Yeah, that's actually a good leadership skill is the ability to kind of hear someone out and not interrupt. And it's one of those things I've been trying to work on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that going. My invitation for you to interrupt me with what'd you get done? How'd you do?
Let's see. I did very, very little. Um, I did put that video on. You'll notice that this looks almost exactly the same. I'm planning on doing a lot tonight. I textured some of those kappas. That's basically it. And then I did this cool live stream last night that we were just talking about. And
Yep.
that took way longer than I intended. And I just keep getting to the art table super late at night. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I I barely touched the page, so this would technically be like one of those failure time periods where I just haven't done anything. But I did get something that I've been kind of putting off for a while done with that video. So kind of a positive and a negative.
Yeah, and that video kind of does tie into one of your goals from the last art check, so that's
Right.
good. You did cross that off the list. The other thing I'd say, other than just come on, man, meet your goals, is the textures that you did lay down are really cool and
Oh,
kind of
thanks.
complicated. So I think that's actually kind of neat.
Yeah, I'm using kind of crescents and half circles to kind of try to get like the idea of like a bumpy texture, but have it only be in the shadows. And so, anyway, this is I don't even know if this story is going to look cohesive at all because like on one page I'm like I'm going to play with splatters and then in the next page I'm going to play with textures and then the next page I'm going to play with I don't know. But I guess I drew it so maybe there's some sort of cohesiveness to it. I don't know. It looks okay, I guess.
Yeah.
each page is kind of its own experiment. It's been fun. I don't know how good of an idea that is for a story, but yeah.
Oh,
Anyway.
Victor, just responding to your description of your stream yesterday, said that your idea of kind of delegating it out when you ask a question is particular like participants.
Yeah.
He said it's a good idea. The awkward pauses were funny though.
Good. Good.
um, and you know what's weird is like I didn't feel like it was too awkward. And one of
Yeah.
the things I appreciated about it, having taught college classes, is there's a method to that
Yeah.
that kind of draws out the quieter people. And I do feel like you did manage to do that through that kind of patience of waiting. You drew out some people who may not have gotten a word in edgewise otherwise. So yeah, I mean, like, you know, you'll probably improve it as you do it again. But at the same time, I think there was some skill and definitely skill that would, like you were saying, translate in the classroom beautifully. It's just hard when you're used to having to have that, you know, that emotional read from a
Right.
room, and then, but I felt like it wasn't that long of
Yeah.
pauses. Pauses always feel 20,000 times longer when you're recording than they
Right.
actually feel in the playback, where you're like, oh, that was only like 3 seconds, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Yeah.
um, cool.
Yeah. So how about you?
So I got let's see, two more panels penciled. I think that's two more than the last time we met. And then I penciled two more panels of the quarterly stories page. So I'm about a panel shy on both, but I'm planning on doing those both tonight after we record. So that kind of puts me right on point.
Cool.
And I'm kind of happy about how it's coming out. And I'm a big advocate of like slow and steady.
Yeah.
Um, I think just the process of the way I've been working on quarterly stories kind of proves that, where it's just like, it's a panel a day pretty much for like years. And I'm
Right.
finally hitting, above the 80s in the level of pages that I've gotten done. But it's like, it is a long slog. But it's funny with this, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll hit the deadline.
Right.
So yeah,
That
but I
that
am jealous
shot
because
that shot
you're
over your shoulder as you walk into the room, and then the reverse shot of you coming into the room is pretty awesome. Like
thanks.
you don't typically that's not a shot you see a lot in comics. You see it a lot in television and movies, but I feel like most people don't do that in comics.
Yeah,
It's
and
cool.
that's one of those ones where I wanted to cross the line which I've
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to cross the line effectively is to kind of like literally do the flip.
Right.
Because if I did any other transition to try to get him on the other side of the image, and the main reasoning for that is I wanted to move him to where like the last panel is going to have a close up of his hand that I want on the right side. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
or sorry, on the left side. So that's going to kind of prep, uh, people for doing that without feeling like, oh, a million years have passed,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's one of those things of kind of like we were talking about. I think when we were talking about oh my goodness. It was something to do. It was a conversation we had recently where I think maybe it was when Scott was over here. We were talking about kind of complicated paneling
Oh
and
yeah.
how you kind of said that the problem that you were trying to solve kind of made the paneling an easy thing to come to because it was a solution,
Right.
you know? And it's like, I find that that happens a lot. Where with that, it was pretty intuitive because it's just like, oh, yeah, that's like the only real way I can do that flop, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I feel like
Yeah.
if you set out to do something complicated, it's often going to be very convoluted. But if you set out to solve a problem and the solution happens to be complicated and you execute it well, then it's fine. But like if you're just complicated for the sake of being complicated, like if something more simple would do what you wanted it to do,
Yeah.
you should go with that. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it. But yeah. So, so challenges. I don't even know. Like I can't even remember what. I don't. I don't know. I can't remember what's going on. I'm so tired.
Me too.
I can't. So I'm sure something happened that made it so that I can't. I couldn't get to my drawing. It's just like it's been like a week or more of I can't get downstairs to my studio until like 10. And honestly, I don't know what it is. So yeah, I don't know what my challenges were, other than that.
Well, I think that might tie a little bit into what our topic's going to be a little later. And don't worry, we're not doing another topic about what about how do you proceed when you're tired? Like,
Right.
because that's always the tempting topic because we're often very tired.
How are you doing?
Um,
I'm exhausted. Me too. Let's talk about that for 50 minutes.
yeah. But but I do think that will translate a little bit to the topic, and maybe that'll explain a little bit why you're, feeling kind of woozy and forgetting stuff
Yeah.
because it inevitably is the cost of work, which will tie into our topic.
Yeah.
Um, so oh, Victor said he did enjoy the. Wait a second. Come on, it was good in the chat. Sorry. Um, Okay, actually, it's Squatchy was saying that the stream he did yesterday was cool, and let's see. Oh, he said he was glad he didn't cuss, which is hard if you're a cusser.
Yeah.
And that's something I struggle with a bit too because I do have a potty mouth at certain times.
Yeah. He said before we went live, he was like, "I'm gonna try really hard, man." It's like cool. And then right after we turned the stream off, he was like, "I did it." I was like, "Yeah, man, you did." It was pretty rad. So it was funny. But
Yeah, it's funny. That's one thing from my workplace that I've gotten a lot better at kind of holding back on because like even on a college campus, it's like you can get away with a lot more foul language at like a private art college than you can in like a normal workplace.
yeah.
But let's see. I also just like this is just one thing I'd say that's become a theory of mine about language because I think most people in my generation had this like Tarantino stage where it's like you're like kind of at that part of your life where puberty's hitting and you just see your first Tarantino flick and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna use the F word every other word. And then it becomes like ingrained and part of your like vocabulary and the next thing you know you're like just like cussing all the time, which actually takes away the power of that word.
Yeah.
And so to me, like one of the things I like about pulling back on it is now if I say like the F word, like people are like, whoa, which is kind of cool. So it's like returned powered word in vocabulary. So
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so what were we were going to talk challenges,
Yeah,
right?
you've got challenges. So what are your challenges? You have challenges, Josh.
Other than staying on topic challenges, I basically am just exhausted and kind of, a lot of positive things are happening. Like at my work, we just won a pretty big award for our industry, and they like called out like the art as like a big reason for that, which is really good. Makes me really proud. Um, and it's like an industry thing, so it's like pretty cool for that.
Yeah.
But that's been a lot of work to kind of get to that, and so it's like it's just kind of trying to balance that and trying to kind of balance just the typical challenge of just balancing a long commute with a long work day with a high demand job, and at the same
Yeah.
time like try to get that fuel, you know, when you're on fumes. It's a challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So plans for me.
Oh, Gaz is in the chats. Hey, Gaz.
Hey,
Sorry.
what's up, guys? No, it's fine. Uh, I'm gonna knock out a few of these panels. I will. What time is it? If we don't go too long tonight, I will finish that panel that I've been like working on for a bit. That panel with the turtle looking characters, the kappas. I'll finish that tonight, and that's a major one. And then I really have two. They're not simple, but more simple than that one to do after that. And so that'll be. So I'll definitely get that one panel done, and then I will make progress on another panel, and then I will be close to completely finished with the inks. So I'm gonna. What is today? Wednesday. I'll finish the inks before Monday. I'll have this page done before the week is out.
I'm excited, man. I'm very excited.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Except then I've got to figure out what I want to do with my life after that. So
That's a great place to be, though.
yeah,
Like,
it is.
fight for getting there, because you have like 10 projects you want to do. So
Yeah.
one of them can queue up,
Yeah,
which
for
is
sure.
great. Just don't let it gap too much between, because then you might lose momentum.
Yeah, no, I usually don't. I usually start it the next day. So
Nice.
yeah. So how about you? What are your plans?
Okay. I definitely need to pencil. Let's see, where am I at? I'll probably have the next page of quarterly stories finished. At least the loose pencils, but I'd like to be on tight pencils for panel one of that page, and then I will be done with the penciling stage and starting the inks on the last page of the quarterly stories anthology number 2, Dragon Learns to Share story that I've been doing. So that's kind of the plans.
Cool.
That and hopefully kind of staying alert and sane.
Yeah, you should be alert because the world needs more alerts. And
Alerts, exactly.
we
Oh,
have.
that was a like prime dad joke, like
Yeah,
grade A dad
I
joke.
feel like you should also be adult because the world needs more adults. But I feel like when I get tired enough that the dad jokes just flow freely, like the wine of some place where wine flows freely. All
Yeah,
right, so I think I've entered the rambling stage, which means that this is a perfect opportunity to start our podcast section.
let's do it.
Do you want to introduce the topic?
Yeah, yeah. So it's weird because I'm pretty exhausted, but I'm a little fired up about this one because of a couple recent conversations. So the topic this week is work, and that might seem like a very like okay, work. What? How? Where's that going to lead? Um, and this is going to possibly offend some people. Maybe. I hope not. But I
I you,
really want to be unfiltered and honest in this bit.
And I would like to
Um,
I'd like to state that
yeah.
right now before we get started, if you get offended at this, I don't think that's either of our faults. I think you should take a good hard look at yourself and why you found it offensive. I'm just going to say that because I
Yeah.
don't think we're going to say anything offensive, but I could see
Yeah.
people getting their feelings hurt or being offended because of what we say, but I don't think it's because of the message as much as it is of the receiver.
All right. So that said, trigger warnings put out there.
Right?
Um,
Buckle up.
the the thing that kind of got me, it just gets me a little frustrated because I've had two incidents within the last week. And I'm not going to say where or who. I'll just kind of give the gist of the conversations and the people, well, a rough idea of the people I was having those conversations with. Um, so I've had conversations recently with two people who are not financially in the best positions. They're younger than me, and both have had the attitude of, "Well, I'm stuck here in this crap position because I just haven't lucked out like all the executives or like people with your kind of position, kind of attitude."
Right. I wasn't born into the luck that you were born into.
Yeah, like nobody's opened that magic door that's been open for you that you just kind of prance through, and just kind of this assumption. So it just made me want to like do a little bit of content on this because I don't know if I've talked about this. Maybe I have, but it feels like I haven't really addressed this too much. So I thought it would actually be helpful to just show people like listeners and stuff who might maybe even have that same kind of feeling where they're like, okay, Cory is like, a professor at a college and that's a lofty position. And so like, if that had been handed to me, then, or like Josh is a art director and has been an illustrator. So if those clients had just handed the work to me, then I'd be in that spot. And then there's other people who might be listening to this and being like, I don't want those jobs,
Right.
And in that case, hopefully you won't be the people who might be slightly offended by this. But um, I think there is a problem with culture in the sense of the generation kind of after me, and somewhat of my generation, I think, and maybe it's not even a generation thing, um, where people will look at um, people's successes and feel like their instant answer to it to kind of justify their own non-successes is just to be like, well, the cards just didn't like, land in my favor. Like,
Yeah.
the dice just didn't get rolled towards me. And there are scenarios before we get heavy into this where that's completely true. You know, there are some people who are born with like no legs, and in that case, you're kind of in a rough position compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
There are people who are born with mental disabilities, and you are kind of on an uneven playing ground.
I want
Starting
to
off,
I want to interject here.
yeah,
I think that what you're saying is absolutely true, right? I
yeah,
think I think the world is absurd, and the absurdity of nature, how some people are born into a prosperous situation and some people are not, and some people are
yeah,
born physically one way and some people are born physically another way. Those are all facts. And one thing about existentialism that I really like is that there's the idea of facticity, which is a stupid word, but it's the idea that there are facts in your life that you have to deal with, right? They
yeah,
exist, but you get to ascribe value to them, right? And
yeah,
so there is one person who is born into a situation, another person who's born in the same situation. One person decides that that situation defines them and that they can never get out of that situation because they are defined by it. And the other person says, screw that noise, I'm going to do what I want. And they choose
yeah,
to ascribe a different value to that situation, right? Now, this is
yeah.
a,
What I'm
yeah,
just to interject. So, because I think you're heading somewhere we're going to be probably most likely kind of concluding with.
okay,
Um, so before I get into that, I want to say that what Cory is talking about is not the exception that I'm talking about. The exception that I'm talking about is like, let's say I'm born into a war-torn country and at 3 a bomb drops on my house. Like no matter my perception, that just altered reality.
yep,
If you're born in like Serbia, when like bombs are dropping, you don't really like, no matter how your perspective is, you're in a town where bombs are dropping. That's
Right.
remarkably different than the scenario I was born in.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to preface by saying there are some cases where, like, despite your perspective, it just sucks.
Yeah. And I agree with that.
And you may not have the potential to kind of grow to be an artist or something like that. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try, and I think that's going to be what Cory and I will be heading towards. Sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you entirely. I just want to be
Yeah.
clear about my initial preface, because but I will say, to like, the assumption that people who've succeeded were handed what they succeeded with on silver platters, there's an exception to that, where sometimes that's completely true.
Right.
Sometimes somebody's born into like a super wealthy family, they're given a massive inheritance, and they have a huge advantage over, like, 99% of society. So I'm bringing up those exceptions so we can kind of throw them out because they're exceptions.
Okay.
But I think in general, you're not going to meet successful artists who didn't put in more work than most people would to get where they got. And that's why I kind of wanted to kind of get into our own biographies. I don't know if Cory, you might want to finish your thought and stuff, but I'm just thinking, like, we might want to just give a quick rundown of our own biographies,
Sure.
just really brief. Some of the struggles we've had to go get through just to kind of be where we're at, which, by the way, is not like the ceiling of the potential of where we could be. Because I have a lot of peers who are billions of miles beyond what I've achieved,
Right.
But just to get where I'm at, I kind of want to get into that a little bit.
Yeah. And to finish my thought,
Yes.
I think in any situation, including bombed out cities and everything, you get to decide how much value to put in that. Now, does that mean that it's fair? No, it's absurd. It's absurd that, a huge portion of the world is born into a situation where, they're not like, do I choose art or do I choose accounting? They're like, am I going to eat this week?
Yeah.
That's an absurd amount of challenge. But I still think, not that I expect that there's this like level playing field and that people should pull themselves up by the bootstraps, because that saying in and of itself is really like ironic that people use that as a way, because like you can't, if you're going to lift yourself up and you're pulling against your own bootstraps, it's like a physical impossibility. Originally that phrase was used to show the absurdity of that. But the thing that I think is valuable is this other idea of 100% accountability.
Yes.
And I was listening to lectures on existentialism, and also listening to Kevin Cross talk about some struggles that he was going through. And in existentialism, there is this idea that you are 100% accountable for your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your behaviors. You're 100% accountable for those things, and that there are also facts in your life that may have caused situations or things, but the reason that you're 100% accountable is because that is the only powerful position to be in. Any other position that you take where you start blaming, justifying, and rationalizing your situation or your behavior or whatever, it is a weak position, because it's not a position from which you can act. And I'm not talking about power, like the president of the United States has power. I'm talking about the ability to make a choice and follow through on that choice. That's power, right?
Yeah.
And so if I make a choice and I have the ability and power to follow through on that choice, then I don't believe that there is a limitless number of possibilities, but I do believe that that is the most powerful position that I as an individual can be in, because any other position is going to give me an excuse to not do something about my life. And
Exactly.
so if I don't like something about my life, then it is on me and no one else to take action on that. And if I start blaming the president or my boss or my parents or my neighborhood or my disabilities or my struggles or whatever, if I start using those as an excuse to not do what I feel like I want to do, I'm not hurting anyone but myself. Now,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that any number of those things are not true and don't exist and don't actually have a fairly significant negative impact on my life. But it just, I decide how much value they have. And I
Yeah.
decide whether they stop me from acting or not.
Yeah. So let's, I want to continue further. And I think this will be a topic that's going to carry over because I know we also want to get art done tonight. So let's get into like a just brief rundown of our own kind of personal histories of
Yeah.
just, and obviously this is going to be not like a full out autobiography. If you want to read that, you can check out quarterlystories.com.
Right.
Um, but this is just snapshots of just some of the kind of hardships that, like, I myself have had to overcome to kind of get where I'm at as an artist. And by no means where I'm at is that like a solid foundation. And so that's something to kind of be clear about too. But the reason I also wanted to bring this up is in the case that I started this with those conversations with those people, the unnamed people that I mentioned, when I brought up a few examples that really hit home with them because they were very similar to the positions they had in jobs they had, struggles they had. Like one of them wanted to go to junior college, and yet his thing was kind of like, but I just have to like work like two jobs to kind of like keep the roof over my head. So when
Yeah.
am I going to go to junior college? Um, and a lot of this kind of thing, um, when I brought up some of this stuff that I'm going to be bringing up now, they were really floored and almost angry because I think they wanted to hear, "Yeah, that sucks for you, man. I'm fortunate and I had a really lucky life. I lucked out more than you." I don't think they wanted to see an example that, like, hey, there might actually be a possibility that you could end up in the job I have, like, easily,
Right.
with enough work, and that's kind of like a different thing. So that's kind of what I'm going to get into. Um,
Well,
so
because real quick, I think the only difference between where we all are today and where we could be
yeah,
in 3 to 5 years is time and effort. That is the only difference, right? There's a little bit of
yeah,
opportunity in there, but if I don't put in the time and the effort and that opportunity comes, I won't be ready for it. I tell my students all the time, I could bring in Fortune 500 company. Well, not that I could, but I said, what if I brought in a Fortune 500 company right now and they were going to say, hey, we're going to hire a designer and pay $250,000 a year. Their eyes light up, and I tell them, you guys aren't ready for that. That opportunity would do you no good because none of you in this room would be able to handle that. I said,
yeah,
now down the road, I think many of you would be able to take that position.
yeah,
But the difference is right now, you haven't worked hard enough. You don't have the time
yeah,
under your belt. And so it's not just opportunity, it's that you have become someone who is able to take hold of those opportunities when they do come.
yeah.
So,
And
okay, go ahead.
and I actually think that's a really good point. It kind of brings to mind like some lyrics my band wrote for like a song that we're calling Silver Platters, which is like this song didn't write itself.
Yeah,
Dreams aren't just purchased from a shelf; they're bought with action, time, and work, and no silver platters. And like, it's like it's definitely a huge philosophy of mine that's benefited me in my life, and actually been like kind of a helpful. You could call it like a mantra or just like a philosophy that's helped me succeed in my own life. And I've seen when people kind of take hold of that type of philosophy, use it in a non-destructive way. We can get into that on further topics too. There's a destructive version of that too,
right.
which doesn't account for unforeseen events, which is, I think Cory and I are probably more prone to that as a weakness in our philosophy.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, so I want to get into it. So let's get into it, and I'll touch through it a little bit, and then you can kind of get into yours, and then we'll just kind of close out. But so for anybody who like wants to be an art director, which I had a point in my life where I'd look at like that position and it just seemed like this lofty thing that you had to have like handed to you or something like that. I want to get into like how I ended up there. And I also want to be clear again, like it's not an art director at like Disney or something. It's not like I'm not on the rung of art directors. I'm not like at the top or the upper echelon, but I am in
Yeah.
a position where there are a lot of people who would like my job. So I want to get into like how I arrived there. So first off, I'm just going to start with like kind of how I grew up. I grew up really poor in a pretty big family. And part of why we were poor was my dad was a graphic designer and he took a job at a print company in Texas. And then when we came back, the whole industry had shifted to digital. And my dad had like 4 degrees, um, and didn't really feel like going back to school, understandably. I understand that a hell of a lot more now as an adult, too.
Yeah.
um, and just the industry had changed. And so he was forced to just kind of do a lot of remedial jobs, a lot in management, but it was a house. I had 2 sisters and 2 older brothers, so a lot of kids. And when we moved back to California, we had to live with my aunt because we couldn't afford housing. My mom, once again, it's funny. I've even joked about that on the phone with her recently, where I said it kind of fits our family motto. I forget what the scenario was, but I was saying like, we're overeducated and underpaid. It's like everyone in my family is pretty highly educated, but just we've never been paid extremely well. So my mom had her high school teaching credential, but had to waitress. My dad was mopping floors at like fast food joints and stuff like that. And eventually they saved up enough money living with my aunt who wasn't charging us rent, where all 3 of us kids were sharing like one little room. And then my mom and dad would actually sleep out in the living room on the couch. And then we worked our way up to an apartment complex where my mom and dad made a deal to be the overseers of the apartment complex so they could get a reduction in the rent. And it was a 2-bedroom apartment for five people in a family, very small apartment kind of in the ghetto of the city. And I loved it. I had a really good family, but we were in debt. We didn't have a lot of money. There were times where it was like PB&J for like an entire month. um, and so on. So finally, like we kind of grew older. My mom finally, through a lot of hard work and stuff, landed a position as a teacher. My dad got a better managerial position at like a bookstore. Before that, a hobby store. And so they kind of started clawing their way out of debt a little bit. But I went to like one of the worst high schools in California, in Roseman, California, which is like, look it up on the map. It is just a dot of brown with like 4 houses. And I, myself and my best friend in high school, who actually I think is another good example and case in point of what I really believe is a philosophy. He's the wealthiest person I know, in my age range from my peer group. He works at like Oculus on Facebook campus. And once again, a lot of people might be like, oh, that'd be great. Like when they meet him and not realize like the time I was best friends with him in high school was living in a trailer park with 4 brothers and a single mom. and he pulled himself out of that to get like one of the most prestigious scholarships in California and kind of like work his butt off and get his MBA and acquire a lot of knowledge. And now he's living like up north in like a ridiculous house. Um, but so, which makes me proud because I've seen that growth. But for somebody who didn't see that growth, they might be like, well, that's nice for all those, rich, entitled guys up in, um, San Francisco, like, doing their tech stuff. They had wealthy families. That's not necessarily true. Um, so anyhow, so from there, I, did okay in high school. I was never a great student, but I worked my butt off. And so I got into AP classes, honors classes. Um, and then I misbehaved a lot in high school. So I got kicked out of my house at like 17. Um, at 17, I got like a full-time job. I moved in with friends of mine. We lived in this apartment complex that you could literally look that apartment complex up and you'd see death rates just like through the roof because it was not a safe area. And I lived there, and I didn't have money for a car, so I biked, like literally like across the entire city to get to. So this is like a I walked 5 miles in the snow kind of story, but I biked like more like 12 miles on a daily basis just to get to my work, which was well, so like before I got kicked out, I worked at Movies 12 or Movies 22, like for Cinemark, as doing concession, cleaning like canola oil out of a popcorn machine and cleaning bathrooms and stuff. Because I wanted to be in bands and I wanted to play music, and we didn't have money to get anything. So I mowed lawns and did that and bought all the equipment I needed so we could play gigs. Um, but anyhow, uh, so then I'm in this apartment complex and I get this job, which I was excited about. It was a full time job and it was graveyard shifts at an AM PM, which, like, I've told that story, but, was not a pretty job. A lot of the time you'd have like white supremacists, like gang members coming in. This was pre 9/11. So it's like you had there were no like glass things or anything. Like there were no standards. Now you'll notice like late at night at most franchise gas stations, they'll have like two people on shift because it's just really unsafe to have one person manning an entire gas station that's not a closed system,
Right.
like with the glass and stuff. But anyhow, so I went through that. At that job, I had to clean the restroom, and it was an outdoor restroom where there would be like heroin needles and stuff in the restroom. I like mopped poop off of the walls. I like stocked a beer freezer with like booze that would then get stolen by people doing beer runs. I had to face down like guys who'd come in with like swastika tattoos and tell them to leave. Um, and I worked that job, as I've said before, got robbed at gunpoint, kind of had a life assessment and was like, I need to go to junior college. So I scrounged up the money to go to the junior college near me, which is affordable for people. And that's actually something I was talking to that kid about that he got mad about. But it's actually not super expensive to do junior college. And so I do like night classes, and then I'd go do a graveyard shift. So I'd like get out of my night class at like 11 o'clock because usually they get out at like 11 or 10:45, and then I'd bike from the junior college, which was even further, to my to the mini mart, and then I would like kind of pull a graveyard shift, which is exhausting. And I'd get off at like 8:30. I'd bike home. I'd be home by like 9, and then I'd crash and do it all over again. And I did that for about 2 years straight, and worked my butt off in school. There were a couple of classes, particularly like the math courses, to get that like AA, that were just a nightmare for me because not only am I terrible at math, I'm also really terrible at math when you're like sleep deprived and just
Yeah.
insane, which anybody who's worked graveyards for over a year, it just like starts to screw with your head. There's times where you actually start hallucinating because it just screws with the natural REM cycle. And well, anybody who doesn't believe it probably doesn't live in the Northwest and experience like what it's like not to have sunlight for a year. Um, so anyhow, went from there. Finally, got through all my classes, scraped by, got my AA, transferred to a state school because I couldn't afford. Like I had applied to like Art Center and some other colleges and gotten accepted, but even with like a year scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to afford it. So I went with the option I could afford, which was Cal State. Took out massive student loans, and then basically just plowed my way through school. But like in the first semester there, my dad passed away of cancer, and I was like 22, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, so I had this, like, I remember at that point and many points before that, just this very clear decision of like, okay, at this point you can kind of freak out, screw up in college, or you can just kind of work through it. And so I just chose to work through it. But even while I was at Long Beach, and this is in Long Beach in a really bad neighborhood, sharing a 1 bedroom apartment with a buddy, just to keep uh, the rent affordable, and then also working part time at like 2 different jobs. um, I would bike like across Long Beach in like the ghetto of Long Beach, which once again, look up the crime rates. I'm not kidding. It's a bad area. Um, all the way to Cal State Long Beach, which is a better part of town. And then back again after every single class, to either work or back home. And then from there, just kind of gradually started carving away, but something triggered at that point, like something flipped when I made that choice to like really double down on work. So my grades went from like, because they had dipped a bit at the JC, but something just clicked when I started taking it seriously. I think I realized my own mortality, and I was like, well, you kind of get a shot at this once. So I was like, I'm going to get A's in everything. And so I just started getting a 4.0, but that 4.0 didn't come easily because a lot of it was like filling classes that are like English classes, theater classes, like some of the extra classes you can't get at a JC that are required for your degree. And then going through foundation classes. And as I've mentioned before on this, I've never been a quick artist. And so I would usually work like maybe a day extra. Like everybody who pulled an all-nighter for an assignment, I'd pull like 3 to get the same result. And then just kind of gradually kind of clawed my way through that, working just remedial jobs through the summers. One was like working shipping and receiving at like a Gotch Chocks, where I was like unloading trucks and like lifting heavy furniture for people and then building furniture. Um, and then using this really cool machine that like compresses cardboard, and actually like the lady who managed it had lost an eye because you tie the cardboard after it's pushed down with like this steel string.
Yeah.
But if you don't tie it correctly, the string will pop back. And that actually happened to this lady. So she literally had one eye, and she was like, be careful when you're doing that, because this could happen to you, kind of thing. Although in retrospect, I'm wondering if maybe that was just like the eye had been lost before. Maybe it was like Cory's experience that he posted about in social media with the iPad.
Oh, jeez.
Where he's just like, when I lost this eye, it's because I was tying this steel thing. It's like actually just because you dropped your iPad. I'm just kidding. So then, from there, like just kind of working, I met my now wife in art school and kind of pursued her, and we started dating. We moved in together, but like we had no money, so we had to move into an even worse part of Long Beach. And through that experience, it's like we finally were wrapping up school, and I was just seeing this window of like, I'm going to have all this student debt. And then I saw a few friends who had graduated like a semester before who were all working like waitressing or like bartending or like worse, and just saw the writing on the wall. Like, if I don't actually start taking activity now, I'm not going to be doing art for a living, and then I'm going to be in debt, and this whole thing's for nothing. So I just started cold emailing thousands of clients, like potential clients, like people I had no business emailing. I didn't even have a degree yet. I had like a student portfolio with some personal projects I had built on the side. And I started landing some clients, and then I built up enough of those clients to where when I was out of school, I was able to go to an education company that I luckily knew one person who worked at, who got me the interview, and I had work to show. And not just schoolwork, like professional work. And so I showed that. I got that first in-house gig. I BS'd my way through a lot of the interview because I hadn't really, like, I had learned Illustrator, but I hadn't learned Illustrator. And so I just asked tons of questions, absorbed as much as I could. And then from there, I just, left because I wanted to freelance, but I had been submitting artwork to Threadless and other competitions just because I was going nuts, like drawing happy kids all day. And I had started kind of like pursuing doing skateboard graphics and t-shirt designs and stuff like that. And just like a dog, like when I get home, I would spend like 6 hours just targeting like different potential leads, and keep in mind getting demoralized throughout the whole process, because like 20 of those 20 to like one were like the odds of even getting responsible, like, hey, we'll keep you in mind, so you're just hearing like, you suck, no, we're not interested, we're not interested, and t-shirt kind of persisting through that until I built up a t-shirt client base, and then I was able to quit that job. Actually, before that job, I forgot about that. I did like line separations at like a silk screening place, just peeling ruby lith film and just asking a lot of questions, and just kind of gradually worked my way up until I had built like a stable freelance career. But in that time period, I got jumped and got my portfolio stolen and was beaten so badly I couldn't walk for 2 weeks. That's when I worked at the education company, and my wife and I were living in Long Beach. I got accosted and like by a neighbor who like basically ended up getting arrested later. And we actually had to file and kind of move. Like that's kind of what the cops told us to do. They were like, well, this guy's like, you just should move. So we moved. When I moved to Portland, like I had finally built like this giant client base, and the whole thing collapsed. And that's a scenario like Cory was describing, where a lot of people would be like, well, screw George Bush because he screwed the economy, and now like all the banks are like, and half of the banks were like, I had gotten to a point where some of those banks were clients of mine. So I was like double pissed, because I'm like, dude, I just landed the big clients that are like the big paying clients, and now it turns out they're just paying with like crap money. And so we had just moved to a different state, and my wife and I are left with like nothing. Like my whole base, like my whole projected budget was just none. And so I went from like health insurance to no health insurance, having to go to like institutions to get teeth pulled because I couldn't afford dental work, and just continually kind of clawing through that process. Moving back, kind of like my wife and I literally having to like move in with my family for a while. And I'm just going through a little bit of this just to kind of say, and there's so much more, but that's just a quick glossing over of that. And the whole time, whether I had clients, whether it was dry or not, I just kind of refused to not be doing this for a living. But that all brought me to a point to where when I had finally gotten to the point where I'm interviewing at the place I currently work, and I was able to show the body of work that I built through all that chaos, the clients I landed, the stuff I had grown, the podcast that I had hosted with Kevin Cross during some of that, the social media I had done to kind of build my brand and stuff like that, the t-shirts I had done that like went viral online, and actually some of them caused trends that kind of rippled around and were ripped off by everyone. None of those were like by design. They just happened through that process of chaos. But by the time I actually got to that job interview, all of that pooled into this perfect scenario where I was able to actually say, like, I've been a professional artist for 15 years. I've worked in publishing. I've worked in apparel. And I was able to list everything I'd done. I've done everything from like separating ruby lith to like, doing old school trapping, like at a printing press, all the way to, making things for lithographic print, to web press, to offset press. Being able to mention my knowledge of CMYK, of illustration, of graphic design that I learned by necessity, because like I needed to know graphic design if I was going to do t-shirts and skateboards, because you gotta have type, and good type, not like crappy type. So I just learned it the hard way. Anyhow, my only point is, and this way was a lot more long-winded than I was expecting, but my only point is all of that chaos led to the point where when I got there, I was able to actually say, like, I'm qualified for this position. And so what I just went through, is kind of what goes through my mind when somebody goes like, well, I'm not lucky like you, and like not just going to get handed a position like that because I'm stuck at a shipping and receiving dock. Because I'm like, well, I was stuck at a shipping and receiving dock, or like because I'm going to have to work nights, and I'm like, well, I work nights, like, and I'm like, are you going to school after you work nights? Because I did that. That actually, it's possible.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where um, it's, and keep in mind, I also don't think I'm unique in this scenario because every artist I know, whether it's that extreme or not, or whether it's more extreme, went through a similar path. And so I really want to advise people to like hesitate before they jump in and kind of make a flash judgment about someone, like, you know, like, and how they achieved what they achieved. Or like, I remember the first time I illustrated a book, having friends respond like that. Like, you're so lucky that that publisher reached out to you. And I'm like, you don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, I've sent queries to publishers for like 3 years and have finally landed a fully illustrated book. That's what happened. Like, it was, I mean, luck was them finding it. But someone in the chats mentioned this too. It's like luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Um, so anyhow, my only, that was my kind of the gist of the thing, is like, I think you got to be careful when you come up to people with a prejudgment of what their past is and what kind of entitlements they had, that led them to where they are, because a lot of the time, like, they may have been less entitled than
Yeah.
and
And
that's
I,
just something I wanted to mention.
and I think that's true no matter what situation people are in. I think it's true for people who are in a more stable situation to
Yeah.
look at somebody who is not in a stable situation and judge them and assume laziness or whatever, or vice versa. Like anything, the fact of the matter is that you don't know what's going on in
Yeah.
that person's life, and you don't know what they've been through, and and so anyway, I think I don't know. So many things came to mind while you were talking about that. But one thing I think was one thing that came up was Gazbot said, "My horror stories do not match those of Joshua Kemble." And then Victor Rodriguez says that he's done the Graveyard Shift too, and also said, "I want to see a movie of Josh and Cory. Cory can be played by Matt Damon, and Josh can be played by Jason Lee, and that movie would be awesome." And,
I do like Jason Lee.
yeah,
That's pretty.
I'd be down with being in a movie.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think one of the main things I think is this, right? I want to go back to this. I think that if you are frustrated, jealous, angry at someone else's success, take a good look at why that is, right? And
Yeah.
as soon as you start looking at that and being annoyed that they are successful, that actually doesn't have anything to do with them. That has something
Yeah.
to do with you, right? And I mean, a lot of the time, I look at my life and I think, man, I am super blessed to be able to do this. And I remember talking to my wife a couple of years ago, just saying like, I don't deserve all of the things that have happened and that have lined up. Like, and she said, "Are you kidding me? Like, you are one of the hardest working people I've ever seen. Like, after you're done with a 40 or 50 hour week, you put in another 20 hours
Yeah.
every week, all the time. You've been doing that ever since I've known you."
Yeah.
I remember I started doing that in 2003. And I have pretty much maintained that, with the exception of, the occasional vacation or when I'm traveling or sick or whatever. But I've maintained like 15 to 22 hours a week on top of whatever full-time job I had. And the only exception to that is when I was getting my master's. And that was like because I literally had no more time in the day, but I got a full-time master's during a full-time job,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
um,
crazy.
with the family and everything. And I won't go into detail. I don't think I can hold a candle to any of those stories, but I mean, I slept on a couch for 9 months.
Hmm.
I lived in a studio apartment where I had to open carry a 44 Magnum to do my laundry because of the amount of like dealers and addicts and whatever else criminal element that I was living in my apartment complex.
Yeah.
And so and those are obviously I've handpicked some extremes there. At one point in time, I stretched $6 for 6 weeks for my food budget, and I just ate cans of tuna, 3 meals a day with different mustards mixed in, just
Yeah.
because That's what I could afford. And that was while I was going to school. And so like, I think there's this, I think it all comes down to this, right? I know people who they have every excuse in the world to not
Yeah.
be successful, and yet they are, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there are people in this community, in the 48-hour art check community, who are full-time caretakers,
Yeah.
and still get in 4 or 5 hours a day of art, and there are people that are going out of their way to do incredible things. And the main thing that I want everybody to understand is that if you look at someone and they seem extraordinary,
Yeah.
you need to understand they are a normal person who chose to do extraordinary things.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
as you're going through that, and you think, if the only difference between me and this pie in the sky amazing life is work, time, and opportunity, you can control two of those.
Yeah.
And so I always just tell people, look, fast forward 5 years. What is the best case scenario of where you want to be? Right?
Yeah.
What's the best case scenario? Think of the coolest life that you could possibly live. And
Yeah.
then what has that person done? What does their portfolio look like? What projects have they finished?
Yeah.
Where have they worked? Who have they helped? And then all you have to do is rewind back from that period and today start doing those things, and you're
Yeah.
on that track. And then when opportunity comes, you might end up in a completely different place than what you imagined, but it'll be a good place.
Yeah.
Because if you just use that as an excuse, like, well, right now, I'll describe a situation that I was in. Right now, I just had my landlord steal my rent that I paid for the semester because I was stupid and I paid in cash and didn't get a receipt. So she pocketed it and claimed that I didn't pay. And so now I'm homeless and I'm living in my van that breaks down every few hours, and I can't actually physically drive it outside of this town that I'm in. I could look at that and say, yeah, this is probably a decent excuse to not be able to finish school.
Yeah.
And I did. And I finished it and I figured it out. And I asked for help, which was super hard. And I had
Yeah.
3 part-time jobs
Yeah.
while I had 12 to 15 credits, a semester. And I did what I needed to do. And at the time, I don't think I felt like, oh, this is like superhuman of me. Look at how amazing I am.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, all right, well, that happened. And so what am I going to do about it now? All right, I'll do this. And it's not like it's like this big, like epic movie with these, swelling soundtracks in it that
Yeah.
make it, there's not this montage. It's just like you wake up in the morning and you're like, all right, what have I got to do today? Right. I
Yeah.
looked at everyone that I was going to school with in my bachelor's, and I was like, I'm not getting better grades than these people. I got okay grades, but it wasn't like amazing. Like there wasn't Latin after my name and the commencement, address or whatever. And so like I looked at all those and I was like, I've got to do something else, because if it's just classwork and GPA, that is not going to differentiate me in the marketplace. And so that's when I took out a loan, the first debt that I've ever had in my life. I took out a loan to buy a computer, and I bought a computer, and I taught myself Adobe Photoshop, and I taught myself Adobe Illustrator. And this is before YouTube existed. So I was learning this stuff before there are hundreds of thousands of tutorials online. There were no tutorials online. There was nothing at that point in time. And if you found a tutorial online, it was like you found Solomon's hidden city, and and it was incredible. And so I did all of that, but at no point in time did it feel like, this epic, extraordinary montage sequence in an 80s movie where like I level up or anything. It was just like, what have I got to do now? All right, so this happened. So what's up next? And you look at like Sean Gordon Murphy, like literally slept in a garbage dumpster the first San Diego Comic-Con that he went to.
Yep.
He and a buddy found a factory that like, or a place that like cleaned garbage dumpsters. And so like, it wasn't dirty, but it was like literally a dumpster. And he slept in that because he couldn't afford a hotel room. And so like, the fact of the matter is that there are there are two of those three things that you can affect, and you can affect those things today, and you can
Yes.
affect them tomorrow, and you can affect them the next day. And if you don't, when that opportunity comes, you might not even notice that there is an opportunity, because it
Yeah.
won't show up for you. It'll show up for the people that have made the sacrifices for those 5, 10, 15 years. And when it shows up, and I look at some of the jobs that I've gotten, you know, and it's like, I'm so directionless. I have no idea what I want to do with my life. And so I was a photographer, I was a videographer, I was a video editor, I was an animator, I was a self-taught graphic designer, I was this, I was that, I was this. At one point in time, I was building, like foam sets that you would cover in truck bed liner. I mean, there's like all
Uh-huh.
this kind of, and I did all that stuff because like I just needed to do that to pay the rent, and it was just whatever it was that I needed to do. And then, kind of like you said, at the end of that situation, all of a sudden I get several jobs in a row because I know how to do all of those things. All of that randomness seems very not random now that I look back. There seems like
Yes.
this very directed path.
Yeah.
And it was all because incredible opportunities happened, but also
Yes.
because I made sacrifices to be able to accept those opportunities and meet them, because I had become somebody that could handle it.
Yeah, and I really want to kind of reinforce this too, just by going outside, because I know I went on that long rant about my own experience and stuff, but it's like, so the people I graduated with who are super successful, like there was this guy, Jeremy Spears, and he's like a, a big dog in story at Disney, and like I think the last thing he did was like Zootopia, like he was like head of story on that, and um, a lot of people would like look at him. I don't think he had like a poor childhood or anything, but when we were going to school together, I always just thought he was like this magical being because he 30 minutes before class would bust out artwork that was better than anybody's. And it was like Disney, like perfect, like the sketchbooks you buy for like Pixar,
Right.
like it was that level of drawing. And it was just natural. And so we were just all like, at least the people who weren't close to him, because he was a peer, he wasn't like a friend. We were friendly, we joked around a lot. But I remember just being like mystified by it, and only later, after he had kind of first he landed an internship at Pixar, and keep in mind, a lot of people are like, oh, that would be nice if Pixar handed me an internship, but realize Pixar doesn't give internships to people coming out of Cal State Long Beach. Like it's a Cal State. You that only goes to like there's two schools they recruit from, and both of those schools cost about like $40,000 a year. Not Cal State Long Beach. And yet, and this was before Cal State Long Beach was a recognized like full out art academy, which it's now become, which it totally deserves. And I love my school and alma mater. But the point being, what I didn't know, like it would be easy to judge. And I think at the time I might have been like, this kid, like he's just got everything. I got to work jobs and stuff like that. What I didn't realize was like when he'd get out of like a class, he would drive from Long Beach to Burbank and beg the teachers to let him sit in classes, um, to, which had Disney guys. And he got in with that group. And when they do a trip to like the zoo to do a sketching exercise, like he would be going there not for credit, just begging to kind of be able to tag along and networking and making that happen, and also building his drawing abilities. Then he would drive all the way back to Cal State Long Beach because he's doing those assignments and doing a full load in a BFA program at a pretty competitive school, which is the one I went to.
Yeah.
And that's why he would knock things out that were beautiful 30 minutes before class. And part of why they were beautiful is he's working on doing planar sketches with Disney artists that he begged to be around. Just pretty much just chasing mentorship after mentorship. So what I didn't realize, like when I was in school with him, is he's probably the hardest working guy we were going to school with. He was probably working harder than anyone academically to kind of get that thing. So that wasn't, once again, it's like he had some ability, he had some fortune and stuff, and there's always fortune involved in everything. But the point being, he put in so much work. Um, you know, my friend Brian, who worked on Star Wars, like started out just hustling to get anything and took just crappy advertising jobs and just worked really hard to get something with like Wizards of the Coast, which for those of you who are familiar with like how they pay for the card paintings, pay nothing. But his goal was to like get from Wizards of the Coast to get into Spectrum. So he just did tons of these things and then had to work all these odd jobs just to kind of make those things and finally get into Spectrum, which wasn't a first shot try. And then finally kind of worked his way up and worked his way up. And then finally ended up in costume and then finally ended up in the costume guild. And it's just like a gradual thing. Once again, when you're in it, you don't see it. Like what I was describing, I'm like, it's chaos. But at the same time, like along the road, you're building something. And for me, like that realization, like I said, I didn't click it all together, like what all I had accomplished as an artist until I applied for an art director position, how to like really assess my whole career and be like, oh crap, I'm actually like, I can literally stand in front of somebody and say I can do this job without BSing. Like it's like, I sincerely am perfect for that job. And if I took like any of the elements out of that chaos, that may not have been the case. And then so that's something to really, I think, keep in mind. Gaz said in the chats he stopped being jealous, angry at others for their success a long time ago. Now he just gets angrier at himself for not working hard enough. I don't know about that, Gaz, because you're one of the hardest working artists I know. But maybe that's just a perception. But like from what I've seen, it doesn't seem like you're not working hard.
But also I want to point out that he's not like resting on his laurels and being like, hey, people think I'm hardworking, so I'm cool. Like,
Yeah,
he's still hardworking, right?
yeah,
Even though he's reached, a certain perception and a certain level of art, and he's able to like, convention and
yeah,
people are looking for him to do things, and a moderator of different things. Like at no point in time is he like, I've arrived. That's something that I love about this community. We are definitely in this episode preaching to the choir,
yeah,
because I don't think you could find a harder working group of people.
yeah,
Literally, I imagine that most of the people that are listening to this right now are listening to that while they are working on their side hustle.
yeah,
And so it's really cool. But I think sometimes it's good to hear, and I don't feel like I've made it or whatever, but I'm always just super grateful every day that I am able to like feed and house my family,
yeah,
doing something that I don't hate, and that like is fulfilling at times and things like
yeah,
that. Another thing I wanted to point out, and then is I don't live in a place that I like.
yeah,
I've my family has made sacrifices to be able to do what we do, because I live in the high plains desert of Idaho.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I grew up in one of the most beautiful places in the world, which is the
Oh
central
yeah,
coast of California. Like San Luis Obispo, California, that's where Bugs Bunny was always trying to end up. This isn't Pismo Beach, right? And so like that's where I grew up, and I left there because some opportunities presented themselves. But I mean now. And this is one thing. I mean, I know people that live in Korea. I know people that live, scattered all over the globe and are able to do their art partially because of the amazing amount of work that they put in, but partially because they've made sacrifices in their life to
yeah,
lower their cost of living. I mean, Josh, you commute an hour
yeah,
every day into work because
yeah.
you're living in a place that is nice, but it's not like South Hollywood or Pasadena.
Yeah, and actually cutting in with that too, it's like I think this is another reason that like when I go to the NCS, it's like I've met guys who are like they cut their teeth like doing Disney films,
Yeah.
like working on Disney films, and now they're struggling to get by in like a one bedroom and stuff, and they're still just like carving away at doing the work every day. Um, but like one thing and then there's people in there who are like millionaires and have houses in the Hollywood Hills and stuff and like movie options and license money.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that unifies everyone there is the fact that they're all making stuff and they're all continually making stuff and they're all really into the work. And all of like there's not one member of that group that hasn't done the work. Same with this group. It's like I don't see any members of the hundreds that aren't like actually who've gone through it, who don't do the work.
Yeah.
So, but what I really, um, and I think that's my judgment, on people is like I don't judge people if they're, um, like hell. If you got to move to like Maine, and well, Maine's actually kind of expensive. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of a place because we're none of us are in bad places. But I'm saying if you have to move to like the middle of nowhere and live in a shack, I'm not judging you. What I'm judging by is like, are you doing the work? Because if they're not doing the work, I'm not super sympathetic.
There's one
And
group of
that's
people that I judge, and that's the
yeah,
people that talk about what they want and don't do anything about it.
yeah,
And I don't
and
care
also
I don't
they're
care what your
judgmental.
economic situation is in that point. I don't care what your job is or how fancy or how crappy your clothes are or your car or
Yeah,
anything like that at any point in time. But when it comes to I wish and then you don't do anything about it, that bothers me. It's like
yeah,
just either stop wishing and stop talking about it or do something about it. But
yeah.
stop
And
doing this
part of
thing
the
in the
reason
middle.
Yeah, and part of the reason that's so frustrating for anybody who's made any semblance of progress in this really difficult, really competitive field is you don't realize how hard every person in that field works to even retain where they're at. Like I said, hell, like I think of a perfect example of this would be, uh, um, oh my goodness, it's way too late. I blanked out. But I mean, a good example of this would be one of those seasoned artists, who worked for Disney and was like one of the classics and then got laid off like in the early 90s and
Right.
was just like destitute and was used to a certain level of income. And yet most of those guys bounced back. Most of them worked literally every day till they died. And I mean, I have a tattoo of Crazy Cat on my arm, and it's partially because George Harriman like literally died with the last week of strips executed under his dead body. Like,
Right.
and I tattooed it on myself after I got into cartooning because I want that. I think that's the best way to go out. And I'm not saying I want to work myself to death. I'm just saying I want to be doing my work and be so into it and so passionate about trying to perfect this thing and figure it out. Not even monetarily successful, just get to that point where when you're that destitute, it's still something you want to get those last week of strips out. And like, I think that that to me is like that's the personality that like I'm not judgmental of at all, regardless of where people are at. But yeah, like the wish thing, if you say that around people who are not wishing, they're trying. Um, and also like anyone at any status is trying and occasionally failing, and that failing hurts, and that failing risks, right? If Cory like tries like these side projects and he's putting in this much time investment, which has a cost, and then it doesn't like none of it goes anywhere. That hurts. That's not fun to go through. But we're all kind of going through that ringer. Occasionally, some of us are having moments where like it spills off and you level up, and you may not even realize it because you're in it. But but the point is, when you're talking to somebody who's in it, and you kind of have an attitude of like, well, that's good because you have it and I don't. That just that really that is the quickest way to kind of piss off an artist, and not just piss them off for themselves, but piss them off for you. Like you should be mad
Right.
that you're using excuses to kind of avoid doing the thing you should be doing. Um, so yeah, yeah, rambly.
Yeah,
Hopefully we kind
no,
of hit it.
I think we hit it. I just wanna wrap it up, by saying kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. Um, the only powerful position you're going to be in is 100% accountable for your actions, and your thoughts and your emotions. And that doesn't mean that you need to be robotic about it, and it doesn't mean you can't get down on yourself, and it doesn't mean you can't have bad days. But the fact of the matter is that if you want to be an artist and you haven't drawn that day, you're not an artist that day. But if you've drawn that day, you are, right?
Yep.
And so if you wherever you are, whatever. And I tell people this all the time. Like, I have lived a creative career, right? I've had a creative career, and I've always been doing creative things, but I didn't start drawing seriously until I was 32. And so, I've only got, what is that, 6 years under my belt, right? And I still regret, the 25 to 30 years that I could have had under my belt up until this point. Um, and so don't
What's
wait.
cool? It's so cool because if you are in that age range that Corey started at, it's I think that's actually amazing because the level you're executing now is a testament to the amount of work you put in the time since you started. Because you've made more progress than a lot of artists make in like 10, 15, 20 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with like that mentality of like when you decided to do it, you really committed.
Yeah, I didn't,
And
and I drew a little bit here and there, right? Like I
yeah,
draw here or there or whatever, like, and I did graphic design and I did photography and I did
yeah.
video,
So you
and
had
so
some
like,
aesthetic backups,
right.
but yeah, but
But
still,
when I started doing it, like, I started from, I had never done any figure drawing. I had never tried to draw a human face, like, and
yeah,
the stuff that was really early, was really rough. But my point is not like, hey, look at me and look where I am or whatever, because I still think there are huge holes and flaws. But my point is, you can start doing whatever it is that you want to do whenever you want. There's not
yeah,
like a too old. This isn't like you're trying to be like an actor and you've got like a limit on your looks.
yeah,
Like at some point in time you're going to age out. Your creativity can come at any stage, and that's the main thing is, neuroplasticity,
yeah,
which is the ability of your brain to adapt to any given constant stimulus. Um, or in other words, I'll say that in a less confusing way. Your brain will, get parts of your brain will get bigger if you, consistently add something, just like a muscle. If I'm working out every day, my body is eventually going to go like, all right, this dude isn't going to stop picking up big heavy things, so we got to get better to adapt this, right? Your brain
yeah,
is the same way. If you show up, I've gotten to the point now where if I don't draw, I feel weird, right?
yeah,
It's not like I choose now to, like, all right, I got to force myself to do this. It's like, man, I haven't drawn today, and I start
yeah,
feeling like empty and like there's a lack because it has
mhm,
become part of part of who I am. And,
mhm,
and, and that happens because, for the last, 15 years or something, I decided forever ago, when I looked at all of my other classmates and I saw people that were way more, advanced, than I was, I said, the only thing that is going to differentiate me is what I do outside of class. I started
yeah,
doing personal projects and I never stopped.
yep,
And that's something that anyone can do in any situation
agreed,
at any age. And
yeah,
all you have to do is just decide to do it and do it
yeah,
every day, and then you
and when
are
you're
that thing.
yeah, and when you're trying to kind of work your way up, like even in the corporate ladder, in art, it's like there's the slow track, which is like trying to kind of start at like a small level, work your way up to the different ranks or whatever within. And then there's the kind of breaking down the door level where you've got so much personal work piled up and so many things accumulated from that, successes from that, which inevitably will line up as you do it more and more. Um, that you floor like literally anyone who's been in house forever because you've compiled work that they can dream of working on that they have no possibility to do. And so there's that's something else to consider. If you're not working on personal work, there's going to be someone who is. And so that brings the kind of competitive nature to it, which is like just to stay relevant in this industry, it's pretty necessary
Yeah.
because the stuff that floors other artists usually isn't going to be like, here's the illustration I made for Bank of America. Like that's the stuff most people want to see, but other artists usually want to see here's this crazy thing that you never really get away with doing, but it's
Right.
really cool. And you know it's cool because you know type, or you know it's cool because you know design. Um, and this is what I did because I wanted to do it, and it's pretty cool. um, that's usually the stuff that leads to other things and leads to better things. So I
Okay.
totally second what Corey's saying too.
And I want to end with the most offensive thing I'll say tonight. Uh, and I'm not one of those guys that's like, like I want people to like not do this. I want them to get out. But I do feel like if you are not willing to put forth the effort to become whatever it is you want to become, stop kidding yourself and stop bothering everybody and go do something else. Like,
Yeah,
and I'm not saying like, get out. We don't want you. I'm just saying like for your own sanity, go do whatever it is that you actually want to do, because
yeah,
saying something is way different than doing it. And your actions are how you're defined. And if your actions define you as somebody who is not an artist, not a writer, not a creative, not a painter, not a photographer, or whatever, then stop saying that you want to be that thing. Go do something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. But
yeah.
you're going to
We're
do all of us and yourself a huge favor.
we're in a poker game with high stakes, and if you're not going to put money on the table, go home.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
like that's my point. And that's not to discourage people, because I think the right people will hear that and be like, yeah, I'm on, I'm
Right.
in. Um, and I think that's the thing. You got to be in, because if you're not in, it's really annoying to the rest of us who are trying to get the pot
And if
in that game.
if you heard that and you haven't done anything about it up until this point, like I
Yeah.
want to remind you that all you have to do is do something about it today.
Yep.
And that's it. Then your whole life changes, right? Whatever you do today is the only thing that matters, because tomorrow doesn't exist and yesterday's already done. And so
Yep.
whatever you do today is the literally the only thing that matters. The present is the only thing that you can control. And so
Yep.
I take you back to the facts exist, but you get to decide how much value those facts have. And so let's say that you've spent 10 years talking about wanting to be an artist. That's fine. And you haven't done anything about it. Whatever, right? But what are you going to do about it today? And if you do something about it today, the last 10 years you might have some regrets like I do, but they won't affect you. You'll be behind the eight ball. You'll have some work to do to catch up. But that doesn't mean that today you can't do something. So don't quit just because you're like you haven't done anything yet. But if you're not going to do something about it today, you should quit.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're going to quit because somebody tells you to quit, you're probably in the wrong industry. Because you're going to, like, the harder you try, the more resistance you're going to face, and you're going to face resistance from people you want the approval of, you want that Marvel letter that says like, "Hey, you get to do Spider-Man." It's not usually going to happen your first shot. So if you're the type who's like, it gets tough and you give up, like it's not a good, it's just not a good choice. And like I said at the beginning, there's exceptions to everything. We're not speaking to exceptions, we're just speaking to, like, and just to preface, like, I don't view myself as a victim in my life. Like, I feel like I've been very fortunate, and I have friends who've overcome obstacles way bigger than anything I've overcome.
Yeah.
That first roommate I mentioned, he literally was born without a hand, so he had like a fetus hand for one of his hands. It hadn't fully developed, and yet he's the best guitarist I've ever met. And how he developed that was like he literally like created his own like wristband that like connected to a pick, and then just taught himself how to finger pick with using his wrist, just rotating it like this,
Yeah.
with, well, not with fingers but with a pick, but emulate finger picking like traditional folk music.
Right.
And it's like insane. He's like seriously better at guitar than I've ever been. And it, like, once again, it's like, can I look at him and be like, well, he's only better at guitar because he's, just got a better gift? It's like, no, no, like, actually, I have no excuse for being worse at guitar than him. And literally, he's that good because he put in, like, I can't imagine how much frustration and practice to get there. And yet, like, once again, one of the last person you'd ever hear complain about the situation he was born into. And there's people who have it way worse. So that's my only point, is like, there's people have overcome crazy obstacles way beyond anything Corey or I have faced. So it's like that's the point of this is like
Right.
it literally is not the anger doesn't come because of us. I think we're all pretty content with where we're at and eager to see where we lead. It's just more of like a frustration because like of empathy. Like I can put myself in the shoes of someone who's on that path and is like, nah, you know,
Yeah.
makes like you have these little moments of like the split path with creativity where you can go the create route, which is full of obstacles, but it's way more fulfilling, or you can go the kind of consume route or the just kind of accept and don't change things route. And it's full of a little bit smoother roads, but the ends just don't tend to be so great.
Yeah.
So it's like every time you face one of those, and you're an artist who's on this path and you've gotten through the bumpy roads, but you know the fulfillment there. It's like you see people over here and you're just like, what are, oh, just stop. Like, stop where you're at. Or if you're not going to stop, like, speed up and just go that way. Like, so I can, like, continue on this with encouragement with all the troops here, you know? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I want to end with Gazbot said, yes, I say this too, but it really offends people. And Holly Brown said something similar, and it was like an internet uproar with quote unquote artists. And I just want to say that today's episode has been sponsored by Josh's Design. Make something or shut up and quit. and it's one of my favorite designs. And I'm now kicking myself because several times I've been like, I need to buy that as a mug or something. I don't know if you've got that in a way that you can pull up, but we need to link to that in the show notes for this because it's perfect. It's just a type-based design that says make something or shut up and quit. And is that what it says, or am I saying that right? It's something like that.
Make stuff.
Yeah.
Or shut up and quit. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's one of my favorite designs. And we did promise you at the beginning that we'd say offensive things. So if you are offended at this and you're still listening, which I doubt, if I've offended you, you probably are pissed off and ranting at me on Twitter or whatever, YouTube or whatever. Like, if you're still listening, take a self-inventory, right? The powerful position is to say, what can I do about this? Not how much I hate Cory Kerr and I'm going to go in and I need to, whatever. Like, if your reaction to any of this message is to lash out or get angry or whatever, I forgive you. It's not going to affect me. I don't care. And you've earned my pity because of the attitude that you've chosen to have. But if your reaction is, oh man, that hurts. What am I going to do about it? I'll be there to help you out because you're going to make it.
Can I chime in there in a less like friendly Cory Kerr way? And I really want to hopefully end with this. So if there's hate, just direct it my way because Cory is a loving, kind person. I'm just gonna say, like, if you're offended by this, go get in a fight.
like an actual fight, not like a Twitter fight.
Yeah, like a physical fight. Like go get toughen up. Like, and I hate to say it that way. I know that's popular, but it's just like, seriously, you're going to get eaten alive in the professional world if you can't. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I just want to point out that I don't feel like I came off as nice, and Gazbot is backing me up because he said I'm in savage mode. So
I know. I was just trying to highlight it. Awesome. Right. I'm glad Gaz was in the chats because I feel like you know what it is, Gaz, you in the chats. We felt the aura of Gaz in the room. So
man, we'll
have to have you on if we touch this topic again because Gaz is like really good at speaking straight and speaking truth.
Yeah, all right. It's awesome. You guys are awesome. Everyone in the chats is awesome. You guys rock. So anyway, if what happened? There's no. Sad day. There's no credits. If you want to see what we are working on, if we haven't completely pissed you off by this point in time, go check out our stuff, and you can follow along. on the podcast. This might be a fun podcast to share with people. So if you're frustrated by hearing people talk about how much they wish, blah, 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 just send them a link to this podcast, which you can find at corykerr.com/48hr. And, if you guys want to see some of our stuff, go to corykerr.com there, and I've got all kinds of stuff there. And I am active on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, and I would love to have conversations with you guys on that. Also, just a quick plug. Go check out the video that I produced yesterday with a bunch of the people that did Sticker Stint with me, and check out the hashtag Sticker Stint, because that's another group of people that are bringing it. Like no matter what, like producing something every day is rough, man. And some of those guys did that in spite of life and everything happening, and it's awesome. So go check that out. And then if you want to see Josh's stuff, and if you are interested in a Josh biography, it actually exists. It exists in comic book form, and it can be found at quarterlystories.com, which can also be delivered to you on your mobile device, mobile optimized with the Tapas app. And so go check all that stuff out. Keep making stuff. You guys are awesome.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we'll see you in a couple days.
Bye.